I'm about to go online.
Okay.
This video not available. Why is it saying that?
It might be your settings on your computer.
No, I think it is already online. It says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Do you want me to check? Do you want me to check the YouTube? I hope my internet is okay. I haven't really had internet all day.
Okay.
No. Yeah, it says you're live.
Okay. Well, so let's start then.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. Today we're going, well, let's start over. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Essence of History. Today we're going to be talking about the miracle of Grant's memoir. I'm Amanda Armagost.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence, and it's going to be only two of us today. Now, I'm happy that you chose to limit the conversation to just a special part of Grant, General Grant's or President Grant history, because his history, his life was intertwined in very tumultuous time in the American history. And there is so much can be said about Grant, but I would like to know, why did you choose this special part of Grant's life, Amanda?
I chose a special part of Grant's life because it was really touching to me. Earlier this week, I don't really remember how the topic came up, but Charlie told me this story actually. And I thought it was really impressive because I know we'll get into it a little bit more and we can talk a little bit about the history of Grant's life, but that story that I would like to tell is at the end of his life or towards the end of his life. And back when Grant was alive, I think that women really weren't valued based on things that I've read and kind of my own interpretation of stories I've heard and laws that were in place back then. And Grant really was a gentleman. I think there were a lot of gentlemen back then. I don't know if there's as many gentlemen in the same sense today. Grant was very honest, it sounds like. And it's just things I never heard about him, never learned about him my entire childhood. You know, going to school in the US, we learn a lot about the presidents, but we only learn about while they're president. We don't learn about their life after presidency or struggles that they went through. So I thought it was very touching.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the trivia. What dollar bill is Grant face on?
50.
Yeah. $50 bill. Oh, it doesn't show it. But on the $50 bill, you see Grant's picture. So I'm assuming we have like 46 presidents, but just a handful of them have their picture on bills. So you must assume that he had a huge impact in the history of United States. Otherwise, there are so many other presidents to choose. Now, certainly we can talk about the Grant toward the end of his life and about that, how it came that he started writing his memoir, because as a president, he was approached numerous times to write that. And he always actually rejected the idea. He was from a very humble background and he refused to make himself to a public spectacle, so to say. As a matter of fact, even his presidency was he had to be convinced to even to be a candidate for presidency.
Why did he have to be convinced to be a candidate for presidency? Do you know?
Well, for people who are interested, actually there are multiple books, but there is just a very good book called Grant, just called Grant. You can read everything about his history. he was true and true a soldier, a general. And one of the advantage of the United States was, and truly we adhere to that even today, that the officers are gentlemen and they stay away from public light and policy and politics. As a matter of fact, one of the most grievance of almost every general in the United States, past and present, is that they cannot stand politicians. For people who are interested in that, there's a Secretary of Defense, Jesus, I forgot his name, just during the Bush time, who took over, and Obama continued his defense ministry, practically head of the defense ministry halfway through his presidency during the Iraq War. He wrote a book about how the politician turned into almost like werewolf who sees the moonlight in front of the cameras, in front of the public. That has been always like that. And as a soldier, as a gentleman, as somebody who makes decision about life and death, that has been always, at least it has attracted this kind of gentleman to the military, to the highest level of our military, people who really honor that. And Grant was a huge example of that. He was very famous because practically, and you ask a question, so how deep do you want me go into that? Because his life is tremendous.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about, I don't know a lot about the lives of any of the presidents. And what I do know is just stuff that I was taught in like the normal American education system. It's not going to be the same as what you would learn in a book.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. Every time we had soldiers at the head of our military who adhered to this concept that I just described, we thrived, we won wars, we truly were at our best. Every time we didn't adhere to that, we had downfalls. We miserably, wasted people's lives and our resources and so on. And it goes on and on and on. And just before Grant was appointed, toward the beginning, or in the beginning of the Civil War, where lots of Southern generals went to South and were with the Confederacy and so on, we had lots of generals that they would care about their own well-being more than about the nation. I am in a situation right now, and I know what exactly they feel. Do you do what's the best for the patient, or do you do what's best for your practice, for your generalship?
Right.
That is not a trivial question. To put your patient's safety and well-being in front of yours, that is not what everybody is able to do. And same for general, no different. Do you put your safety of your job in the front line, or do you put the well-being of the nation, or well-being of human being? Because these people weren't killers. And now everybody thinks the generals are killers and so on. So there were, I'm not going to go into details of that, but it was a huge fight, actually, internal fight between Lincoln and many of the generals, to a point that Lincoln said, one of the generals, if you are not going to use the army, may I borrow it? Because Lincoln saw there are multiple things that they could have finished the war much sooner, but the generals were cautious, and that cautiousness was because they didn't want to do a big mistake. They didn't take the chance, like Gettysburg. Gettysburg could have been the end of the war, but when the Confederacy went back, the general in charge of that time didn't want to follow them, didn't want to continue the fall. Let's say, let's reposition ourselves and so on. And that cautiousness cost us 2 more years of war and hundreds of thousands more deaths.
Right. And in that position, you don't really have the freedom to be cautious. You're hired or you're put in that role to make the, the safety of the United States a priority and, things like that. So
Yeah, and
would you say that Abraham Lincoln and President Grant were pretty similar in their values?
no, I wouldn't say that. No, but Grant was the person who actually understood what does it mean take the risk for the well-being of the nation, even if he may have to personally pay for that. And you and I, we know right now I'm going through a similar process where what it means to do the right thing for the patient, even if you personally have to pay for that. So I can feel for those people. Okay. Do you know who else was in that camp? A very good friend of Grant, General Sherman. Okay, so, and if you read about their friendship and, everybody says Sherman, the so-called Sherman Marsh, until recently, or even now in South, Sherman is considered a butcher and so on, because he just cut through the South and cut their supplies and really devastated their economy and so on. But he knew what does it mean to take risk, what is to sacrifice a smaller group of people for the bigger well-being of the nation. And if you know their Grant's friendship with Sherman, how they behaved, the risk they personally took, then you know their soul, that I'm not important. There's something bigger important here. That's the nation. So we have to sacrifice ourselves. We have to exclude ourselves from the public eyes. We have to do the job that we have to do for the well-being of the nation. And as a matter of fact, there were lots of situations where Grant's generalship wasn't sure at all. He had lots of enemies. He has lots of internal enemies. And I'm not going to go through his childhood. He has his own demons, okay? He had a problem with drinking and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to go through that these people are not one-dimensional people. They have, high points and the low points like anybody else and so on and so forth. But in true of his heart, he was a soldier and he was a general. He wanted not to have to do anything with that, but he made the decision that many people before him didn't do that, but he would do that. And that actually, I can't tell based on the history that the Civil War could have gone much, much longer if it wasn't for Grant and many people who were in his camp. And a nation knew that. The nation knew that they won the war because of the risks that Grant took, because of his, being sharpness as a general. And then he tried to be always away from public eye, but wherever he went, people would just show up. And it was a tumultuous time. Lincoln got assassinated, and obviously that was a disaster. And
wasn't he like reconstructing the South? Wasn't that one of his biggest things to do as a president?
Grant, yes, it was. But that was, you see that there were huge gap. There were some other people president between Lincoln and Grant, and that was a huge missed opportunity. Now, I should say that the Grant marching in the South saw the misery of the blacks. Okay, so, and that was really close to his heart, contrary to people that came after Lincoln got assassinated, who had no connection. And it was just a chance that they were on this side. They could have been as well on the other side. They had no emotional attachment to any of that. Grant saw the misery and literally really wanted to do major changes. But one of the biggest problem of soldier becoming politician is that in the military, in the war, you behave differently as in a politic. In the military, you steamroll over your opponent. In a politic, you cannot do that. You have to do compromises and so on and so forth. And that was actually a problem for during his residency, during his presidency, he did a lot of good work, but he missed a lot of opportunities by trying to govern the country like a general rather than like a politician. So you see, nobody's one-dimensional. And for that reason, I think, that his presidency wasn't as illustrious, as productive as it could have been, or as his generalship. And but you ask me why he didn't want to become a president. I hope you got the answer from that now.
Yeah, but why did he become president?
Because multiple reasons. Some of that is family. His family, they would love to be the president's family and so on. But as well, he got truly encouraged by lots of other politicians that they saw him. He has the public literally support to win the presidency easy. And he did. So he got convinced by other politicians and by his family to become a president.
Okay. So do you want to get into his relationship, his friendship with Mark Twain?
Well, the relationship actually, it is not as big as people think it is. They were friends. Obviously, Mark Twain was a very famous person, and Grant was a famous person. And Grant was approached numerous times to publish his memoir. He didn't think his memoir are important enough to be published. He was offered a lot of money for that, actually.
Was he friends with Mark Twain before he was getting the offers?
I don't know exact details of the friendship, but I just know that finally Mark Twain offered him from his own money to put money down, publish it, and give him percentage, which was like 5 times higher than somebody else offered him that. And at that point, that is long after his presidency, okay? And he got
directly after his presidency, then he was facing a lot of financial struggles.
And part of that as well was that, again, most of the generals are not good economists. He couldn't manage his money well. Okay.
What types of things was he spending his money on?
Well, he did speculate in a lot of things, and he got scammed by numerous people, actually. Lots of people who promised him they do great things with his money and took the money and ran.
And back then it was easier. Yeah, it was so much easier to take the money and run because there's no social media to track you down or like phones.
And he was a trusting person, unjustifiably. And in his political life, the same way, when you're in military, that is all connected. And when you're in military, you're with group of comrades, with group of people, your life depending on each other. Once you start trusting somebody, you put your life in their hand. Okay? Once the Grant start trusting the scammer, the writing was all on the wall. Everybody come and say, he's a scammer and so on. He just dismissed them all, say, no, I know him. He's not a scammer, and so on and so forth. So he lost a lot.
Most of his money, right?
Yeah. And they had to move out, and they financially weren't doing well. And, at that time, obviously, the situation wasn't like now that you're a president, you get $100,000 to go and talk someplace and so on and so forth. Most of, the president's salaries at that time were less than a general. One of the reasons Grant didn't want to become president is that he was concerned, can he live with the president's salary? That is not a joke. But as a matter of fact, that at that time, many presidents had the same thing. But now you get about $400,000 is president's salary, which is much less than anybody, in the mid, industry as a CEO of a company, mid-sized industry and so on. But that's not how the president these days make their money. After
Yeah,
that,
they
the
do
book deal
shows.
for millions. They go talk any place like Clinton, talk in a place and collect $100,000 for one talk, and so on and so forth. So, but at that time, you became a president truly for mostly for power or conviction, and he became a president for conviction. So, and after that, obviously people offered him to write his memoir about the Civil War and so on, but he never considered that worthy of writing that. He was offered a lot of money, and then he was going to write a series of the thing and so on, a series in the newspaper and so on. But then he was in a really bad financial situation, and he noticed that's the only way he can get some money back, and that was actually as well, it was during another tragedy. He was chewing tobacco like lots of people his time, and he had throat cancer. He was diagnosed with throat cancer. And he practically knew that his life expectancy is extremely limited, and he has lost all of his money.
And he still had a family too.
And he felt a sense of responsibility to his family. So him writing his memoir was his last act of self-sacrifice or devotion to others, because he didn't want his family to struggle financially. And I know that part appeals to you. That part.
Actually, no, what appeals to me even more is that he's going through these financial struggles, and he understands he needs to be there for his family. He can't, like, women could not have a job. Women wouldn't be able to make money. So if he didn't leave money for his family, his wife would be completely poor and basically have nothing. Like, she couldn't do anything. And Grant was still a gentleman. He had someone who wanted to write his book with him, and weren't they trying to rip him off? Like, they were giving him a really like 10% or something like that.
That is where Mark Twain comes in.
Yeah,
Mark Twain was so angry that they lowballed him, that said, forget about them. I'm going to put all the money in to publish it, and when the money comes in, you get a huge, part of the income of the books and so on. So,
but even then, even after Mark Twain said that you can make way more money with me doing this, Grant was still saying, no, I already made a deal with this publishing company. I'm a gentleman. I shook on it.
And here you are. Again, this military attitude, this gentleman attitude.
That's the part that really impressed me, is that he had been taken advantage of so many times. He was still doing this selflessly for his family, and still allowing himself to be taken advantage of, because he didn't want to be that man who was taking advantage of somebody else. But Mark Twain was the reasonable person and saying, no, you need to make more money for your family. Like, this amount of money you're going to get from the book still isn't enough for your wife. So I think the original publishing company said that he wasn't going to make any royalties, right? It was just an upfront first cost or first one-time check. And then Mark Twain said he would get 75% of all of the income from the book.
And, I don't remember the details. All of that is in that book. But I just know that multiple people approached, and he signed something with this person who was lowballing him. And Mark Twain was enraged about that. Came to the table and tried to get a much better deal for him, and if not, then he would actually make a deal with him directly. So, but it all comes back to that obviously, to the point that again and again in history, people who make significant change in human history, they are not money motivated. Okay. And I know everybody has money worries and so on and so forth, but it is just written all over the history. People who change the destiny of the human being, who change the history, who make an impact, they are motivated sometime by rage, sometime by other motivation that are not noble, but many times by motivation that are noble, by service. They're motivated, provide the service, but almost 98% of the time I can say they are not motivated by money. As a matter of fact, it's one of the almost like a rule of even in the economy. People who are not motivated by money end up making more of it. So, and obviously in Grant, it's a different situation because, he had lots of opportunity to go and talk and so on. He refused all of that. So he wasn't really motivated by money, but he wasn't good at managing the money. So he would have been just fine if he wouldn't have fallen for those scams and so on. So, but all of that came together to what you are trying to convey here, that his memoir, how it came to be, and out of a feeling of responsibility to his family, and so on. So, well, I could go on and on and on about Grant, but what else do we need to talk about? This has been already half an hour, and we have talked about his memoir, which, by the way, it is worth reading, but the books that are written about Grant's memoir are more interesting than the Grant's memoir itself.
Yeah, because isn't Grant's memoir pretty dry? I think I heard that the memoir is mostly, or a lot of the memoir is parts of his journal or parts of his diary. So it's not very juiced up like a normal book would be, where you're saying like the scorching sun was beating on our backs, the sweat, where he just said, we went here on this day. This is what we did. This is what we left.
Yeah.
So it's a more straightforward memoir, but I think it gives a better perspective of
the history of war. That's what it is. It is not the very first essence of podcast we did. We talked about what is the least favorite subject of us, and everybody came back that history is the least favorite. And it was mine. It was mine as well. When I was in the school, the dry history that was taught to us, just the fact and the dates and the numbers. But once you put the love, the emotions, the humanity in that, the dynamic between these people, once you understand how the interaction were, then all of a sudden history comes alive and then become interesting. History was my least favorite subject in the school, and now it's my most favorite subject. I cannot get enough of it because but this history that I get now, it is not just getting the history of the Napoleonic War, when it started and so on, but how interaction between these people really caused that. How, let me tell you something that makes the Grant history juicy. Did you know that Grant's wife, actually, let's go back. Did you know Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Lincoln, saved Grant's life by being obnoxious? Okay.
That must have saved a lot of lives by now.
Okay, so Mary Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, by all regard, was a anxiety-ridden, psychotic person, especially after their child died. And she was lost. She was she would berate cabinet member, and she was the most obnoxious person to be around. And in that theater where Lincoln got assassinated, actually Grant and the Grant's wife were supposed to be there. And Grant, who won the war against the South, was the primary target. But Grant's wife could not stand Mary Lincoln. So they pretended that they are sick or something, so he did not attend that theater. As a matter of fact, the killer passed Grant and his wife on the carriage on the way in and was so disappointed that Grant is not going to be there. They almost changed their plan and so on, but then said, okay, if we cannot get Grant, let's kill Lincoln and so on.
Wow.
So Mary Lincoln, by being obnoxious, and Grant's wife being so hateful toward her, saved Grant's life.
That's really cute, actually. Like,
Cute.
I mean,
Not the
it's
word I
sad.
would use, but you see this intertwining of the history.
Yeah.
That is what makes the history. When you read about the interaction between, Mary Lincoln is lost to history. Okay.
Right. What
And-
else? Tell me something more juicy.
About whom? Do you want to know juicy stuff?
Those people.
Well, Mary Lincoln set a standard that is still to date valid in the United States and in the White House. So the wives of the president, they get an allowance to set up the White House and so on. There is an allowance there. Now, at that time, it wasn't like that. And there's an allowance now because Mary Lincoln went on the shopping spree and spent a lot of money. Another woman who loved to go shopping, they had to take a loan from the Treasury Department and so on. And that is become juicy. So there were talks of impeachment against Lincoln because of that.
Oh my God. I bet he was so pissed at Mary. He's like, what are you doing? You're sabotaging my presidency. I have so many people to free and you're spending all this money.
Lincoln wasn't planning to free anybody. So, but that's Lincoln. We should talk about Lincoln another time. So, a juicy but sad story about Grant. Most of his life, he had problem with the alcoholism and drinking. As a matter of fact, he relapsed multiple times, even within his presidency to that. And during his generalship and so on. And he was disciplined even multiple times because of that. And that is what, he had a very heavy childhood. Okay. Most of these people have. Most of the people who are or significant people, they are significant because of their significant different childhood.
Yeah, I have a theory for that.
Yeah. And so, and many times, he was accused of being drunk and so on, and he had lots of enemies. And I can sympathize with that too. And because if you are so oriented on your goals and so on, you create a lot of dissatisfaction. People who cannot keep up with you will hate you.
Yeah.
And then, so that is one part of his history that lots of people try to come and hurt him because of his history of drinking. And his wife was a big factor on him not to, being able to crawl out of this episode of drinking and so on and so forth. So, well,
That's not that juicy.
well, it would be all over Fox News today if it was today.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon is all over Fox News right now, and he's a talk show host.
Yeah.
He's all over for being
No,
drunk.
I'm talking about this news of his. If Grant was today, him being drinking and so on would be all over the Fox News with lots of juicy details and so on.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So I don't know that. I think we covered most of related stuff to his memoirs and his sense of responsibility to his family.
We should have a series. Well, we should make a series like putting the juiciness back into history or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. That makes it more memorable.
I think so. Well, thank you guys for watching. This was Essence of History, and today we talked about Grant's memoir. I'm Amanda Armagast.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence. Joins us for more history.
Thanks, guys.